everybody I'm sure like you have family and friends that are Eagles fans, and they were probably
Right.
contacting, and I started getting the emails and the tweets and the Facebook messages. What's going on with this team, Lloyd? You know everything about the Eagles, and they end up losing to the New York Jets, 20-14, in a total shocker. And when I look at this one, Glenn, everybody is kind of questioned: is Jalen Hurts taking that step forward this year, or is he kind of stunted his growth? And in this game, he had some very, you know, throws you kind of shook your head at, and he had 3 interceptions. So, what were you seeing when you watched this game yesterday?
I think it was just a bad game. I think it's a situation where the NFL, unlike the NBA and some other leagues, it's parity. So even with your worst teams, you're still going to get their best shot. They're the reigning NFC champion. So even though they didn't win the Super Bowl per se, every week they're going to get each team's best shot. So I think it's a situation where, like last year, I think it was week 10, that the Commanders come out. Good time of possession. They run the ball. Eagles turn the ball over a few times. I think it's just one bad game. I think if it continues, then it'll be something to discuss. But I think with a new offensive coordinator, different things going on, defense is showing different schemes. They're just adjusting.
Yeah, and that's what I was telling a lot of the fans. Look, you got to be cautious. And I know the 1972 Dolphins are popping the corks, and they're the last undefeated team in the National Football League. But it's really not about being undefeated. It's about playing your best football in late December, January, into the playoffs. And we've seen this in the past. I always caution everybody. One of the Eagles team that I covered was the 2008 Eagles. If you remember, they're 5-4-1. Donovan
Yeah.
McNabb gets benched. Kevin Cobb comes in, and McNabb kind of turned the season around. They finished 9-6-1, win the division like on the last day of the season, but then they got extremely hot in the playoffs, and they end up losing in the NFC Championship game to the Cardinals that season. So it just shows you how things can turn very quickly around the National Football League. And yes, it was disappointing that the Eagles didn't get it done. But much like you, I think, okay, at 5-1, you want to stack W's, and that's what they've done. And maybe they look past them, because next Sunday night they're playing Miami in that big Sunday night football game. Everybody wants to see whether they can cover Tyreek Hill. But I thought overall it's a loss. It was an ugly situation to review the tape and then burn it.
Right. I think it was a little bit of everything. I think you see, late Friday, you see Sauce Gardner gets ruled out. You see, they're thin in the secondary. It's not necessarily about being arrogant, but it's one of those things where you saw, I think in the first quarter, Hurts attempted 25 passes in the first half or something like that. So they felt confident in being able to attack that Jets secondary. Brian Johnson maybe should have adjusted some. I wrote about the run pass ratio this morning. Swift's one of the league leaders in rushing. You maybe should have ran the ball a little bit more. It's one of those things that when they usually have a lead, they run teams out of the building, and they maybe should have stuck with that. But overall, it's week 6. We're going into week 7. Things happen. You'd rather be 5-1 than 3-3 or 2-3 or 2-4, something like that.
Yes, and you're right. Because when I don't do my power rankings anymore, but this team is an upper echelon of the league, and they have the lead in the division, and that's the most important thing. They're ahead of Dallas. Obviously, Dallas is going to play tonight in a big key game against the Chargers. We'll see how they do. But the Eagles have at least 1.5 game lead on them, and we'll see if that gets further. And the battles are going to get tougher, because I think last year the Eagles had great health. They had the same 22 starters in the first game as they did in the Super Bowl. And we're seeing a big thing is Lane Johnson. He went out with that ankle injury, and quite frankly, Jack Driscoll kind of, he was hurting out there. I think they were kind of targeting him, getting around the edge on him. And this Jets defense, as you were saying earlier, is a quality group. Yes, everybody kind of talks about Zach Wilson and that offense, how they've struggled. But this defense for the Jets, they're 3-3 now, and they're under bye, and this team is hanging around.
No, I mean it's a really good defensive front. I think you have to remember, Driscoll's had moments where he's thrown in there when Johnson gets hurt and he doesn't perform well. The week after, when he doesn't perform well, when he gets a full week to prepares to start at right tackle, he plays better. So I think it's a situation where they'll have options if Lane Johnson is out, and I think it's a situation where, like we said, he just got thrown into the mix. It was a really good defensive front. Bryce Huff is really good at what he does, and it's just one of those things where they blitz, they knew to bring the pressure. every team going forward bring the pressure, and they're going to bring it more than 40, 50% of the time based off of what they're seeing, and they'll have to adjust going forward.
Yeah, Glenn, and a big thing you were talking about is that run pass ratio. I know one of my loyal readers, Ridley Dave, he was saying to me, the Eagles did not run the football enough. They had 22 rushes for 80
Right.
yards, and Hurts threw the ball 45 times. And with Hurts, he's still a dual threat quarterback. I'd like to see him throw probably about 30 times or so, and then try to get Swift more involved because Hurts also was their leading rusher with only 47 yards in this game.
Right. I mean, I think you run to set up the pass and vice versa. You have Sua Opeta. He's in the lineup for Cam Jurgens. You have Driscoll inserted into the game. You run the ball. You use Gainwell. You use Boston Scott. You run those guys out of the building. I think over the past 4 games, they had given up 140 plus yards to various teams. So it's a situation where even though they play the pass well, they rush the quarterback well, they are susceptible in the running game. And Brian Johnson should have went there. Definitely when Hurts throws that last interception, or I mean, and they're still up two, you could have ran the ball. Worst case, you punt, you play defense.
Yes. Yeah, and then you make Zach Wilson, who he had
Right.
no interceptions, and everybody talks about he had no turnovers. So, okay, he had a good game because he didn't turn the football over. And why not let that defense pin their ears back and kind of let Hassan Reddick close the game out like he did against the Rams the week before and get some pressure on him. But Hurts, he trusts his receivers, I think, a little too much in some situations, particularly AJ Brown. He'll throw it up and let Brown kind of go up and get the ball and double coverage. And I think sometimes that's to his detriment. And yesterday kind of was not seeing those types of situations and taking the easy throw. And unfortunately, that last throw that you talk about, yeah, that was a huge interception, gave him a short field.
I mean, I think people love the fantasy football idea of it, but you have to understand you have two 1A receivers, you have really good running backs, you have an all pro caliber tight end. It's kind of hard to spread the ball around. And so you people say, well, he has all these weapons. Well, you got one, number 11 is going to throw a tantrum if he's not getting the ball. Devontae Smith is a Heisman winner, regardless of how quiet he is. He wants the ball. Goddard wants the ball. So it's one of those things where they're going to have to continue to work through it. And I think it's probably the first time that you really sat there and thought like, okay, damn, I wish Shane Steichen was still here.
Yeah, and I talked about that earlier in the season when one of my guys. It's like it's a good situation to have having all those weapons, but yes, everybody wants to eat. Everybody wants to get their numbers up, and last year they kind of had that nice balance because both Brown and Smith both had that 1,000 yards, and
Right.
they have Goddard there as well. Goddard's come along; he's becoming one of the best tight ends of football, and you got to make sure he gets his catches. So, we're talking to Glenn Erby from Eagles Wire from USA Today on 1029 The Game and Broad Street South Network. This is Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. Big thing, before we put a bow on this game, Glenn, is injuries. The Eagles, I think, not having Jalen Carter in this game, they didn't have Darius Slay in this game to start, and then they lose Blankenship. We talked about Lane Johnson as well. Talk to me a little about the injuries and you think how the Eagles deal with them going to that big Miami game.
I mean, they're banged up, especially in the secondary. I think it could be potentially a situation where you hope to get Slay back, but you could have 2 or 3 rookies and first year guys, first or second year guys playing. So it'll be something to monitor. I think as far as Johnson, he'll be week to week. He'll probably miss this week. You're hopeful to get Slay back. Blankenship re-aggravated the rib injury, but the MRI and things like that, the X-ray was negative. So you hope he could play. I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't play. So the idea is you're hopeful to get Slay. Justin Evans back. You compare him with James Bradbury. Bradley Roby may not play, so it'd be a situation where you may see Mario Goodrich and Eli Ricks in the slot again. So, you don't necessarily want Tyreek Hill running past those guys. So I think it'd be on Sean Desai, to either have Slay travel or have these guys play a lot of zone. But, they have their work cut out for them this week, and it'll be something to monitor.
They do, and when I look at this Dolphins team, I watched all these famous teams, particularly I always remember the 98 Vikings with Randall Cunningham, where he had a great season with Randy Moss, Jake Reed, Robert Smith, all those weapons. And
Chris
I look at
Carter.
this team, this is a lot like at this Miami team. Mostert is playing extremely well. He leads the NFL in rushing touchdowns, and he's eating. I know they lost a Chen. He's probably going to miss this one. But then you talk about Waddle, you talked about Hill. And then when you look at Tua, he's getting the ball out of his hands quickly to these weapons and allowing them to make plays. So it's going to be interesting to see how Tua goes in this situation.
I think, well, you rush the passer, you do your best to pressure him. You'll get Jalen Carter back, so you do your best to pressure him up the middle, and then in the back end, you back up a little bit. The philosophy of the defense is to keep everything in front of them anyway. I think that'll be a focal point this week. I think in terms of that run pass ratio, running the ball, keeping that offense on the sideline and off the field will be imperative. So I think it'll be a situation where they'll have to switch up, how they do things and get back to that dog mentality and that run first. Pound them out, time of possession type of thing.
Yeah, I do agree with you. And it's interesting because last week I had Mike Tanner on for the Messenger, and Mike he wrote an article about how Eagles fans kind of they need to relax. Kind of this team is very good and they're in the mix, and the main thing is stacking W's this time of the year. So I think they will be in the mix in terms of the playoffs. I've always thought they'd win the division first time. The NFC East would have repeat champions since 03-04, and they look like they're in the driver's seat. But their schedule's tough, and when you look at the Eagles, they have Miami that we've been talking about. Then they're at Washington. They have Dallas at home, and then they have their bye at KC, Buffalo, San Francisco, which everybody's looking forward to that matchup, at Dallas, at Seattle, the Giants who are struggling. We can talk about them a little bit if we want to. Okay. Arizona, and at the Giants to close the season. So, having the Giants at that time at the end of the year, those are two games to kind of look forward to. And then Arizona those last 3 weeks, that may help them get right before the playoffs. But that middle stretch that I was talking about is going to tough. We're really going to find out about this Eagles team, especially when you're talking about playing the Chiefs and playing Buffalo and San Francisco.
I agree. I mean, you'd hope. I mean, some people feel like the best thing is a split, but I think in terms of this team, and when you talk about where they want to go, you have to come out of that little gauntlet of games 4-2. 5-1, things like that. You'll play the Cowboys twice. You get a chance to play Josh Allen. You get a chance to play Mahomes and those guys again, and these other teams. So I feel like they have to make a statement. It's an opportune time to make a statement, and it's an opportune time for them to finish down the stretch, peaking, playing their best football before they decide to maybe rest guys going into the postseason.
Yeah, and hopefully the Eagles will be in that situation where they, for all their fans, if they can get to like 12, 13 wins, then they'll probably win that division and then host a game and then go from there. We're talking with Glenn Erby from Eagles Wire, USA Today, on Lloyd Vance's Inside Football 9 the game with Broad Street South. We're recapping week 6 around the National Football League. We'll jump to the other team that Glenn is very familiar with, the Baltimore Ravens. And you have to say Cheerios about this one. They made their first trip over to London. And, they looked very good in this game, in my opinion. You would like to see them score a few more touchdowns, but they were able to control the clock, put points on the board, and take care of business. And that's the main thing. But when I look at this Ravens team, they're another one. I thought they'd win their division early on, and yes, the Steelers are right there at 3-2, but I think that the Ravens should win the AFC North.
No, without a doubt. I mean, I think they got themselves together. The drop passes last week had everyone up in a hysteria. They didn't drop any passes yesterday. They went to London with the game plan. The last time they went, they got blown out. So Harbaugh made a concerted effort to get those guys over there right after last week's loss. They spent the week over there. I think that showed with them being, a little bit fresher than the Titans. But I mean, it's a great group. The defense is stout, regardless of who's in and out. Brandon Stevens can play cornerback. He can play safety. Humphreys is back. Jadeveon Clowney's playing like a number 1 pick. So that they have great potential to just be on Lamar Jackson, what that offense can do. I'd like to see them run the ball more, but, just like the Eagles. But in terms of what they're able to do, they'll go as far as the quarterback will go, and he played great yesterday in spurts.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson spread the football around. That was a key thing that I saw in this game. I think he had 8 different receivers that he got the ball to. You're seeing Odell finally get a little involved. You like to see him kind of start rounding back to what he was before he got hurt. But I thought they did a good job in terms of getting the ball to their tight end, Mark Andrews, and in particular, Zay Flowers had a very nice game. He had 6 receptions, 50 yards, and a touchdown. And then you saw Lamar Jackson breaking out of the pocket and running 13 rushes for 62 yards. So, and the biggest thing I was impressed with him is when the game first started, he was 11 for 11. He came right out to shoot, throwing the football and making some big plays. And it was good to see, because it seemed their two losses were two games I thought they probably should have won. And you saw that they put that last one to Pittsburgh behind them, and they kind of came out there ready to go.
Yeah, I mean he's flowing. He's still rushing the football, but that's not necessarily his reputation. He's making a lot of good throws from the pocket. You'll see him. I think a couple of times yesterday he was able to make a side arm, underhanded type throw. So he's accurate. He's confident. He's changed. Todd Monken has given him the ability to change plays at the line of scrimmage. He's doing what he wants to do. I think last week that was more about Morgan Moses not being in the lineup and TJ Watt just raising hell. But I think from an offensive standpoint, he's getting more comfortable. He's maturing as a quarterback. I know it's crazy to say because he has an MVP, but he's getting better as a passer, and he's only going to get better. So that's something to watch.
Yeah, and he's a young quarterback. I think he's younger than Stetson Bennett, who's a rookie quarterback for the Rams this season, who just came out of Georgia. So, Lamar came in at a very young age. He won that MVP. And Glenn, what do you think in terms of? I hear a lot of times from emailers and people that call my other show. Can he win in the playoffs? They're like, oh, Lamar won't get it done in the playoffs. What do you think when you hear that type of talk?
I mean, I think it's relevant talking though. He's one of the highest paid quarterbacks. He hasn't gotten past a certain round in the playoffs. So from that standpoint, it's correct. If he runs into the Steelers, he struggled against them. You're not sure if you want to see him play the Steelers in the playoffs. But I think from the standpoint that, he's improving, Monken did a great, like you said, Monken did a great job with Stetson Bennett, other quarterbacks. He's going to improve. I think it's just about putting him in a position to be efficient, to be accurate in the playoffs, to be able to dump the ball off to Andrews and those different guys. And like we talked about with the Eagles, using Gus Edwards, using Justice Hill to run the ball, to set up the pass and the play action, and he'll be okay. But they definitely have to get past that next step before you can start talking about him being elite or talking about him being among the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, and a big thing with the Ravens, like we talked about the Eagles, is health. They've had a lot of guys banged up all season. Marcus Williams this week goes out with the hamstring. Ronnie Staley's he's their key to their offensive line, and he's been banged up all season. And I think they had a couple guys in their secondary also beat up this year. So, how are the Ravens handling that health issue? And do you think John Harbaugh will keep this train rolling?
He's done a really good job. I mean, you have Adafe Owe, David Ajabo is out, but then like we talked about, you have Clowney, playing at an all-world. He's going to set a Ravens record for pressures. Cal Van Noy's been here for 2 or 3 weeks. He's made an impact. Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith are killing it. They're dogs in the middle. So, those two make things go. That defensive line has been solid. Roger Washington, Travis Jones, they're doing things up front. On the back end, like we talked about, Brandon Stevens can play cornerback. He can play safety. Marlon Humphrey is back. Ronald Darby has been okay. Rock Ya-Sin has seen his snaps increase. Kyle Hamilton got ejected, because of the targeting penalty, but he's great at the safety position. So I think they're going to be fine when they can get Marcus Williams healthy. Pepe can come back. They're going to have a great secondary, a great linebacking core, a great defense, period. So I think it'll be on the offense to do what they're supposed to do, carry their weight, and the Ravens will be there in the end.
Yeah, and that was a big hit by Hamilton. I thought maybe he gets a flag, but I didn't think that they should have thrown him out of the game. That almost reminds me of the college rule where they send somebody off for targeting. And you always see big hits around the National Football League. They used to celebrate them when I was coming along. They used to have, what was that called? With Michael Irvin, got you, man, or something. I forget what they used to say. They used to, it was like the big hits. They would celebrate them on ESPN and everything.
Come on, man! I think it wasn't it? Come on, man, or something like that.
One of them. Yeah. But at Hamilton, as you said, he's a good young safety coming out of Notre Dame, and he's a Pro Bowler in my opinion. So, did you think that was warranted to throw him out, or what did you see there?
I'm fine, man. I mean, it's a good hit. You want to see him make his presence felt. I think receivers, tight ends, they'll be aware of him. You don't want guys, taking helmet to helmet hits. I think maybe the fact that you're seeing his feet lift off the ground a little bit is what got him, tossed out. Like you said, I was surprised to see him shot tossed out. I think we see that more in college than the NFL. But I'm understanding, with them wanting to make the game safer and things like that.
Yeah, and I remember Eagles game that I covered where Lawyer Malloy for the Falcons. It was similar type. It was a bang bang play,
Right.
and he hit the guy. He hit him, and he was a known hitter. And I think sometimes reputations of players, these refs look for things, and they're maybe a little quick for the flag. But I talked to him in the locker room afterwards. He said, "Look, I wasn't trying to hurt him or anything. I was just trying to make a play on the ball, and I'm taught to hit the guy, run through him, and that's what happened there, and." Unfortunately, it's just football. There's only so much safety you can make around the game. Older guys like my grandfather used to always say, just put flags on them. You know what I mean? Make it two hand touch. But that's not the game that's played today by these guys out there. And hopefully, the receiver will be okay for the Tennessee Titans. And then the Titans, I thought the Ravens did a good job in terms of shutting down Derrick Henry. Yes, he had that pretty big long run out of the Wildcat position. But otherwise, I think he had about 37 yards other than that long run. And he did have a touchdown, but they did a good job controlling him. They had 6 sacks in this game. And in particularly, all the hurries and the pressures, they were able to knock out Tannehill. When I saw him on the cart, I knew this game was over.
Yeah, they're physical up front. I mean, Clowney, he had his 2 sacks,
Yeah.
half a dozen pressures. Justin Mabuke had 2 sacks, 2 quarterback hits. He's been stout in the middle. Michael Pierce has been stout. Like I said, Broderick Washington, Van Noy had a sack. So, it's a really talented group. Roquan and Patrick Queen are the two that make it go. And that's one of those reasons why you won't necessarily see a team run those guys out of the building. I mean, Roquan Smith is a monster, 10 plus tackles a game. Patrick Queen has stepped his game up in the contract year. So, like I said, I think once that secondary rounds into form and they all get back healthy, they're going to be like 6 or 7 deep, at cornerback and safety with all those guys able to interchange. So it's going to be something to watch.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if the Ravens can come out of the North and then compete with Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins. Some of these high-powered offenses, because I always think a good defense travels well. So that'll be fun to see later on the season if
Agree.
these teams make it to the playoff. Wrapping up on this London game, though, and I was asking Mike Tanner this last week, what do you think about the NFL going over to um, Europe and London and Germany and all these places? They're even talking about possibly playing a Super Bowl over there. Is it a good idea? And as crazy as it sounds, Shad Khan, the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, has toyed around with permanently moving his team to London.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think if it's one team that's gonna do it, it'll be them. I think I've heard people discuss it. Whatever team it's gonna be, have to be a team like the Jags or someone with a young quarterback. But I mean, it's an interesting situation. I think it's 5 or 6 years ago, it was one of those taboo things, and teams weren't interested in doing it. Now, you saw the Titans went over on a Thursday, played on a Sunday, and they don't even give teams a bye after that week anymore. It's like recalibrate, get yourself together. So I think from a financial standpoint, from a money standpoint, of course, it makes sense in terms of players from America necessarily wanting to relocate to London or Germany. That'll be something that'll be discussed. So, will they play 4 or 5 games, 6 games over there per season? And that'll be a situation where that host country has a team, or will you up and uproot, everything to Germany or London? I think that's something that'll be discussed in terms of, will American players want to uproot and will they have to?
Yeah, and Mike was talking about, I didn't even think about this, taxes and currency and paying of players, over in Europe and all that. So there would be a lot of logistics, and
Correct.
it's going to be interesting to see if over the next couple of years if a team moves over there, and I think the NFL though likes that money, like you were saying.
Correct.
This
More
is
than
Lloyd
anyone.
Vance.
So, more
Yeah,
than anyone.
yeah. This is Lloyd Vance. You're listening to Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. We are on with Glenn Erby from Eagles Wire and Ravens Wire from USA Today. He is our featured guest, and we've been discussing. We talked about the Eagles, we talked about the Ravens, but it was upset Sunday, and Glenn, there was no bigger upset than this one. I'm watching this game and I was like, is this really happening? PJ Walker from Temple University and XFL fame, he's their third string quarterback for the Browns. And he comes in and does just enough to beat the red hot Niners, who are a 15 game winning streak. And it was one of the biggest surprises this season. No one saw this thing coming.
I mean, Brock Purdy's human. I mean, I think you get people that want to hype him up, and they want to make him the next Joe Montana. And well, we have to understand this is his second season in the NFL, and just like Jalen Hurts and some of these other quarterbacks, he's going to have a bad game, and he may not necessarily be elite. And it may be about Christian McCaffrey or Debo Samuel, or Trent Williams. So no different than the other team. When your left tackle goes out and your best running back goes out and your best wide receiver is banged up, it's going to be kind of hard. So I think Cleveland came into the game. I think they wanted to rebound from that last effort they gave out as a defense a couple of weeks ago. They played well. Myles Garrett played well. The quarterback played well. So I think it's one of those things like we talked about, any given Sunday, the parity in the league, and then the Browns are a really good team.
Yeah, and I like that you were saying the parity around the league, because in looking at the standings, there's 9 teams that are 3-3 at this point in the season, so it's wide open. And I know we have a lot of listeners in the Tampa area, and I still remember a couple years ago, the Bucks are 7-5. Tom Brady's looking very old, and they got beat pretty bad. I think it was on a primetime game, and everybody said it's over for them. And they were able to turn around, get hot at the end of the season, and then they win the Super Bowl. So a lot of football to be played. Obviously, the fans don't like seeing their teams lose, but I do agree with you when you talk about the parity of the game and how it's affecting the league. And Purdy, it was a tough week for him. 12 of 27, 125 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But to his credit, he got his team in position to win that game. And Jake Moody, who was 1 of 3 on his kicks, the rookie kicker that they drafted, he misses that 41-yard kick. And it's funny. I'm watching the game. I said to my son, he's going to miss this kick. They're like, no way. And you could just see that they were struggling. It was one of those games where they were just hoping for a victory, And then the Browns, to their credit, the offense didn't do much, but defensively, Jim Schwartz has done a great job in terms of building that defense. The former Eagles defensive coordinator when he won the Super Bowl, he seems to have Shanahan's number. I think he's like 8-1 versus him, lifetime for his career versus them, and they did a great job in terms of shutting down that explosive Niners offense. Yes, as you said, there were some penalties and some injuries. The Niners had, in particularly, I couldn't believe they had 12 penalties in this one, and then Cleveland had 13, so there were a lot of flags thrown at this one. But it was a good win for Cleveland, and Cleveland's in the mix too. They're 3-2, and we'll see where they go from here.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what happens with Deshaun Watson, they could be a playoff team. The defense is really stout. I mean, I think you had some people questioning that defense after the Ravens game, and Baltimore was able to do what they want offensively. But I think in terms of Myles Garrett, that secondary, Denzel Ward, it's a stout defense. So if they can get Deshaun Watson going, that running game going with Kareem Hunt, they can definitely be a viable playoff team in the AFC North. So from that standpoint, the AFC North is stacked. But I think in terms of Purdy and those guys, teams have bad games. You're not going to have an 0-17, 0-16 Lions team. So in terms of the parity, you have to bring it every Sunday. And there's just going to be some Sundays where guys don't have it. I think it's just about which teams are able to regroup and not turn those dumb losses or those ugly losses into snowball type of things.
Yeah, and you can't look past anyone, as you're alluding to, And it's not like college. You can't schedule that homecoming opponent. Little Sisters of Poor. You're going to come in there and blow them out. We just saw Penn State play. I think it was UMass.
Yeah.
And they were a 40-something point favorite, and then they beat that number. So it just shows you in college, a lot of times some of these teams that come in and they're just happy to be there. But these guys are pros, and they're coming out there and they're trying to win. I know a lot of people talk about tanking and collapsing for Caleb to see if they can get the quarterback coming out of USC. But all these guys want to win, and they want to compete. Now, maybe at the end of the season when things get ugly and the coach gets fired, last 2 or 3 weeks, okay, that may be a different story. But it's way too early for that. And I think every team almost feels like they still have a chance, probably except for some of those 1-5 teams and 0-6 Panthers. Speaking of the Niners, they're going to play at Minnesota on a Monday night next week, so that's going to be interesting. And then Cleveland is going to travel to Indianapolis in a game that could be, you know, who's the contender or not, who's going to step forward and that. So that'll be another game to be interested in.
I mean, I think, you have Gardner Minshew. We'll see what he can do. He has an opportunity to start. He gets Jonathan Taylor back. So that'd be a good game to watch, I think, in terms of, Cleveland. Can they get Deshaun Watson back? Does he want to play football? What's going on there? So I think it's, outside of, like we said, the Patriots and the Panthers, who just spent the number one pick on Bryce Young. So, and the offensive coordinator is going to call the plays and not Frank Reich anymore. So that'll be something to watch. So I think in terms, the Panthers, from the standpoint of giving those picks up to the Bears, you could be a bit frustrated, but, they're a rebuilding organization. Young will figure it out and they'll go from there. I'm not sure what the Patriots are going to do. And I think that's intriguing in terms of Belichick and his inability or his ability to evaluate talent, whether or not we want to actually talk about it.
Yeah, that's a great segue, Glenn. And I was just getting ready to ask you that because we talked extensively about this last week, and I had given I give out a lackey each week, and that's
Okay.
that's a person that just has a big boo boo, and that's what I gave to Bill Belichick, and we started talking about, is it going to be his time to step away, and Robert Kraft, has he seen enough of him? And I saw Teddy Bruschi talking about on ESPN that he needs to come fishing with him and stop coaching. Where do you stand with Belichick, and do you think he's going to be able to survive this?
I mean, I think he's earned the right to try to survive it. I think if you're Robert Kraft, you want to have a discussion with him. I mean, he's no disrespect. He's a terrible evaluator of talent. And I mean, you take out, okay, you drafted Tom Brady, you drafted some other guys, but over the last 7 or 8 years, there's, whether we're talking about N'Keal Harry or any of these guys, that's half his issue. He can't draft.
Yeah.
He's a horrible GM. We make fun of Jerry Jones. He's worse than Jerry Jones as a general manager. So in terms of coaching, he's a Hall of Fame coach. There could be some discussion about whether or not he, having a defensive coordinator as an offensive coordinator last year, if that type of privilege is only set aside for him. But I think, if he can get past being the talent evaluator and give that to one of these, rising, NFL personnel guys, he can get it back under, control. But I think they have the worst talent in the league. And we're talking about the Cardinals. We're talking about the Browns, Giants, all of that. The Patriots have the worst talent in the league. The Panthers will be okay. They'll figure it out. The Bears will be okay. They'll figure it out. That's a veteran team that's going nowhere.
They are, and they lose Matthew Judon, their best player on defense, and Mac Jones has been he's been a disappointment. Everybody talked him up coming out of the draft, coming out of Alabama, and he's just not gelling with that group around him. And as you said, they just don't really have anybody to really help him out. They bring Juju Smith-Schuster over. He came from the Chiefs and then the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's just not doing much for them, and their offensive line just seems to be a revolving door. And it's like, we'll see how it turns out. But right now, it's not good optics. And when I look at the Patriots, let's try to see if they can find a win here. They play Buffalo this week. That's probably not going to be good. And they play at Miami, Washington, Indianapolis. They finally get their bye. They're at the Giants in Week 12. Maybe that's a situation. They have the Chargers. They're at Pittsburgh, Kansas City in Week 15, at Denver, at Buffalo, and then they finish with the Jets. So it's the road is going to be long for them.
At this point, and we're talking about Belichick, his best shot for redeeming himself would be to shut it down. I mean, are they losing on purpose, or is this some type of, magic trick, to get the guy? No. But like, you just ran off those games. You might as well not worry about winning. Let Malik Cunningham play. You get yourself Caleb Williams. I'm certain he won't go back to USC if he has a chance to go back to, to go to New England and be the next Tom Brady. You reinvent yourself and you can spin the wheel again.
Yeah, yeah, and They're going to be an interesting team to see how they finish down the stretch. And as you said, are they going to collapse for Caleb he really wants Don Shula's record. That's why he's really hanging around. I think he's 29 wins away. Uh, and I think he thought it'd be a little closer after the season, but things are not working out the way they want to.
I believe he's close to breaking the record for most losses by an NFL head coach
Oh,
as well.
I didn't even think about that flip side of it. And he might have that too. Yeah, because he did have some tough years in Cleveland as well. So I'll have to look at his record on that side of the ledger because everybody's always talking about him getting the most wins, and apparently there was some kind of tiff between him and Shula, and he wants to beat his record. So
I
that's going to
think
be interesting. And
his legacy will be something to talk about for years to come, for sure, in terms
yeah.
of who is he
Now,
really. And
Now, last week we talked about surprises around the National Football League, and a big thing is this team. They're really not surprised me this year, but I think it's a surprise because it's them, and this franchise has been so downtrodden. The Detroit Lions are 5-1, and they took care of business against the Tampa Bay Bucks, 20-6 in this game, and it was a good quality win for them, and you're seeing a franchise that is finding ways to win, and they're looking real dangerous. They look like they can win the NFC North.
I agree. I mean, I think Jared Goff has been shockingly really good. I mean, he's always been good. He's been to a Super Bowl, but in terms of being efficient, in terms of him being a guy that looks like he's probably going to get a contract extension and all those stupid type of things, I'm happy for him. But I mean, they're super physical. They have the edge rusher. They have a good secondary, and that's without Branch and Gardner Johnson in the lineup. They just got Jamison Williams in the lineup. So we'll see Jahmyr Gibbs. I would like to see them, feature him a little bit more. But in terms of how they play, in terms of those guys having an identity, in terms of those guys having that same physicality and approach to the game that their coach does, they're an exciting team to watch. And I'd be shocked if they didn't win the North.
Yeah, and they're a team that's right in the mix. And Glenn, what do you think in terms of a team in a mix? I meant to ask you this earlier. The New York Jets are hinting around that Aaron Rodgers could come back from his Achilles and play if they're in contention at the end of the season. Do you think he has a shot? Because typically that's a 12-month injury.
I don't. I mean, I think it would be a situation even at his healthiest, you would have to have booking tackles, and it'd be a situation where he'd have to be able to just, from an arm talent, from an ability to stand there, you hike him the ball and make, those decipher, be accurate. I think he could do it. I think you could see a miracle. From the idea of a good pass rushing team getting after him, I don't think he's going to be able to run. I don't, like you said, it's a 9 to 12-month process. His would be the fastest in history. I mean, I think Cam Akers just did the fastest one, and he's still just now rounding into form in terms of explosion and things like that. So it would be one of those things where he'd literally, I think, be back there in a shotgun situation, making those throws, and it would be all arm talent. Could he do it? It'd be a fascinating thing to see, but in terms of their tackles, I'd be scared to watch it.
Yeah, because Mekhi Becton, he's still struggling to be healthy, and Dwayne Brown's banged up. Yeah, that offensive line is not doing a great job. We talked about the Eagles having those 6 sacks, and Wilson surprisingly was able to weather the storm, and they were able to win that game. A quarterback that is weathering the storm and they're doing a nice job. They're stacking W. It's the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. So I'll go back to last Thursday. They did a nice job in a 19-8 win over the Denver Broncos. Yes, I know it's the Broncos and they're struggling, but it was the 16th straight time that the Chiefs have been able to beat the Broncos. And the Broncos, Sean Payton, he had his humble pie the week before, and this team looks like they're in total disarray.
Yeah, I think you'll see a complete rebuild there. I think the only question now is about whether or not Russell will be there or if he'll not be there. But I think you'll see Peyton look to bring in his own guys. I mean, you maybe keep Javonte Williams at running back and you keep Surtain at cornerback. But everybody else, I feel like, can go. In terms of the Chiefs, their ability to continue to reinvent themselves, Pacheco, Kadarius Toney, any type of wide receiver, Patrick Mahomes is lights out. He can make any throw. Andy Reid continues to innovate himself. So, it wasn't being to me. I think that's an awesome thing to watch. But I think in terms of like we were talking about the Broncos, I think everybody can go, and I think Russell will go too.
Yeah, and the other Peyton, George Peyton, their general manager, I think he's going to be let go too, and if this situation just keeps getting worse, and that team's 1-5, and it's not going to get any prettier for them. And it is unfortunate because I was always a big Russell Wilson fan. My son's always liked him, but it seems to be closer to the end for him. Maybe he's just in a bad situation or something. Maybe he can bounce back, go somewhere else, but it's just not going to work there in Denver. And they gave up so much money to get him. If they get rid of him, I think it's going to be like a cap hit of like $60 million dead cap money. It gets spread over a couple of years, but it's going to be a lot of money that the team is going to have to eat. But it looks like it's not salvageable at this point. And when you saw him have that fumble the week before and he came to sidelines, you could see Peyton was like, you know what, I'm almost done with you. So we'll see how this one turns out. We're talking with Glenn Erby from Eagles Wire and Ravens Wire from USA Today. This is Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. We're going through the Week 6 games, and then at the end of the segment, we will look forward to Week 7. One of the other games in Week 6 that I really had my eye on, and this team is dangerous. They played the Eagles a week before, is the LA Rams. They're 3-3. A lot of people counted them out because they have 19 rookies and Stafford's around 35 years old and didn't have anything left. But I think, Puka Nacua has energized the team, but also getting Cooper Kupp back has really kicked this team up to a new level. So they beat the Arizona Cardinals, another team that's kind of struggling. They're 1-5, but they had a big 26-9 victory.
I think the running back has been outstanding. I think that's the one thing, that has them going. Kyron can do it all, and that's the one thing that made Cam Akers expendable. I think Puka has been amazing. Cooper Kupp came back and raised hell against the Eagles. We weren't able to contain him until you put Darius Slay on him. So I think from that standpoint, in terms of Sean McVay being reinvigorated, I think it's a cool thing to see. He was ready to walk away, and then you have this young team, and this is the team that said F those picks, and now with undrafted free agents and guys that got in the draft, they're rebuilding through the draft. So it's no longer F those picks. But I mean, I'm happy for them. Aaron Donald, I think if they could continue to get healthy, there's no outside of the 49ers, there's no one dominant team in NFC West. So it's definitely a situation where, like the Seahawks did last year, I could see those guys sneaking into the playoffs as the 6 or 7 seed if possible.
Yeah, there's always 7 teams as they play, and it's going to be interesting that they're at San Francisco in Week 18. So maybe San Francisco may have nothing to play for, but it would be fun if there's playoff implications on that game when those two teams hook up. And Aaron Donald, I know he's looking to go out on a good note. He got his ring, but he came back for some money, and he wants this opportunity. We'll see. Now, a team we got to talk about, and this game, it had some high drama at the end. It was the Buffalo Bills. They hold off, surprise. This is another surprise from Sunday. They hold off the New York Giants, who just seemed to have everybody hurt, and they had no reason to play in this game. Daniel Jones did not play. Tyrod Taylor was out there trying to make some plays. But Buffalo holds them off 14-9. And I think the refs got involved a little too much in this game, a lot of penalty flags. And what did you think in terms of Buffalo? I think they almost survived, in my opinion.
I think so. I mean, I think it's similar to what we were talking about before. Dayball went back to where he was the offensive coordinator, so they got those guys who are going to give him a good effort. It sucks for Tyrod Taylor to see him make that one mistake and things of that nature, but it was good to see him get to start a game against his former team. But I think in terms of Buffalo, I think it was a situation where they maybe were looking ahead. They have some pretty big games coming up. Josh Allen's banged up. So I think they'll take the win, they'll survive, and they'll look to move on.
Yeah, and Josh Allen, he has a shoulder injury, and I'm hearing, and I talked to some guys, they said he's probably going to play this week, that it's not dislocated or anything like that. It's more soreness type of issue. So they have a big game coming up at New England. We'll see. They'll probably want to put it on Belichick. I think Sean McDermott doesn't have any love lost for Bill Belichick, and he may try to run the score up. And Josh Allen, speaking of him, he didn't have the best game, but he made two huge throws to his tight ends for touchdowns. Particularly that one was an absolute laser that he threw for a touchdown. And you just see his arm strength. And they're trying to get away from him running the football so much. They're trying to get James Cook involved in a running game and try to not have as many design runs for Allen. So this team is very dangerous in terms of him beating from the pocket. You got Diggs, who had 10 catches for 100 yards in this one. And then Gabe Davis did have a fumble in the game, but he's explosive as well. So Buffalo, we'll see if they can play this way when the weather gets real bad up there in Orchard Park. But this is a very dangerous team.
Yeah, I think it'll just be about, Diggs keeping his head. Those guys being able to run the ball, like the run pass ratio, not putting so much on Josh Allen, and whether they can continue to stay the course defensively. And, when they have those breakdowns defensively, or when they have injuries, especially at the two safeties, they start to become a bit vulnerable. So, they have Von Miller back, so he'll do what he'll do what he does, and he'll start to ramp up towards the playoffs. But I think if they can have good play in the secondary, and Josh Allen can limit his, the need to be Superman and just take what the defense gives him, they're definitely a dark horse, Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, they're going to be in the mix, and it's going to be fun to see which team, whether it's Miami or Buffalo, is going to win that division. And they have some key battles coming up. Those two teams, they played in Week 4, as we know, but they're going to play the last week of the season, Week 18. So it's going to be fun to see which team is going to step forward in that one. Speaking of Miami, this team, they're talking about they could score, and I was just looking at their pace. They scored over, I think, 240 points, I think, right at this point in the season. Do you think that they could break the record of old Denver Broncos and have over, I think their record is close to 600 points? They're talking about 700 points scored in the season for this Miami team. They beat the poor, unfortunate Carolina Panthers. They're on sixth, 42-21 in this one.
I mean, I don't think so. I think again, like you just talked about, it'll be a situation where can everyone stay healthy? Can Tyreek Hill stay healthy? Can Tua stay healthy? The weather's going to change. They play in the AFC East, so outside of those games in South Beach, they're going to have to play a game in Buffalo and that disgusting weather. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but they're going to definitely play. They're going to have to come to Philadelphia. They're going to play that game in the cold. There's going to be games where they're going to need to play in the cold, where they're going to need to be physical, where they're not going to be able to just throw bombs away and run teams out the building. And similar to last season, it'll be interesting to see how they respond when they can't do that, when they can't just air you out, and when they have to run the ball, be efficient, goes 12, 13 plays. Can they do that? Can they sustain that intensity on defense? Can they continue to take the ball away on defense? So they'll be a team to watch, going forward. And Buffalo showed that they can be slowed down and they can be beat.
Yeah, and when you look at Miami, a lot of people are not talking about that defense, but that defense that Chris Greer, their general manager, has built, they did a nice job there in terms of, Phillips is a playmaker. He's an angular type of defensive end. He could get after you in terms of the pass rush, and then, Xavier Howard and those guys in the back end, and Ginkle in the middle. They have a pretty good defense, and everybody's talking about that offense. So it's going to be really fun to see them match up with all the weapons that we talked about with the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even have Jalen Ramsey back. So I think from that standpoint, it'd be a good matchup. I think, especially if Lane Johnson can play, even if you can't play, in terms of them being able to deal with a team that's physical, that plays with physicality. Sunday night, be a good vantage point. A.J. Brown is physical. Devontae Smith can be physical. Can they be physical on the outside? On defense, Darius Slay, James Bradbury, those guys could be physical. Yes, it's hard to get your hands on Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, but when guys do put their hands on them, will they be able to, hold up under that pressure? So it's going to be a good measuring stick for both teams.
Yeah, and then Tua, Tua. Everybody's talking about he's an MVP candidate quietly. They don't, much like we talked about with Brock Purdy. Is it the weapons or is it really him? But he leads the league in terms of yardage, and I think he's up there passing touchdowns as well. So he's having a great season, and he's utilizing all his weapons, and he's been healthy. So that's the big thing with Tua, and that Eagles pass rush, though, that unit had 70 sacks last year to lead the league. They're going to be coming after him.
No, I think that's the game plan. I mean, I thought Josh Sweat is coming off that side, to his left-handed. Jalen Carter should be back, like we talked about. Hassan Reddick, talked about getting that cast off his thumb, and he made it an emphasis that when he got it off, he was going to get sacks and punches, and he's had about 4.5 sacks over the past 2 games. So between Sweat and Reddick, that'll be something to watch in terms of the pressure they're going to put onto it. They're going to do it with only 4 guys, so they're not going to blitz, so they're going to drop guys in the back end. So I feel like Sean Desai is going to make Tua and those guys be accurate. He's going to make them be efficient, and he's going to make them have 9, 10 and play, 10, 11 play drives. And can they do that, without turning the football over, without getting frustrated?
Yeah, and that voice you're hearing is Glenn Erby from at Eagles Wire and at Ravens Wire from USA Today. He is our featured guest today on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. The last one I want to touch on is this team for the second year in a row. Everybody left them for dead, and I think they're on to come up, and people have to watch out for them. It's the Cincinnati Bengals. They're now 3-3. They had a big win over the Seattle Seahawks, a pretty quiet team who were 3-2. It was 17-13. Yes, it was a tight game there, but Joe Burrow, he's moving around the pocket a lot better. There were a couple situations where he would have got sacked at the beginning of this year, and he was able to roll out of pressure and get the football down the field. So, if he's healthy, this team is going to be one to watch as in the AFC North.
Yeah, I mean, they're stout, and I think you have to give kudos to Zach Taylor. Cincinnati used to be one of those organizations where when you had to go play there or you got sent there, it was one of those things where you could understand why guys didn't develop. And they started off slow. Burrow got hurt. Jamar Chase was talking about he didn't want him to come back, and they stayed the course. They've gotten better, and just like they did last year and the year prior, they're going to be there in the end. And I wouldn't be shocked if you look up and they're 10-6, or one of those situations where they're 3-3 now and they run off 7 or 8 straight. You saw Boyd get into the situation yesterday, and they did it without T. Higgins. And so if they can continue to be stout on defense, Burrow can continue to be healthy, they're going to be a team that's going to be there in the end. And I think you'll look up 6 or 7 weeks from now, and the AFC North will be the division to watch, and that'll be the division that'll have 3 or 4 teams battling for playoff spots.
Yeah, and who doesn't want to see him? Patrick Mahomes and the
The
Chiefs
Chiefs.
because
Yeah.
Burrow always seems to have their number. Now they are going to play Week 17 in Kansas City, so that'll be fun if they both can get there healthy and they have all their weapons. Because, like I said, they have no fear going into Kansas City. A lot of teams and players do not want to play there. It's a loud environment. You can't audible up there, but he's Joe Cole and he's played very well against Andy Reid and Mahomes.
Yeah, they're a tough bunch. That's one of those rivalries that for the next 7 or 8 years we'll like to watch, and they love to go there. So it'll be a situation where they struggle to deal with Chase, they struggle to deal with T. Higgins. Those 3 wide receivers. The tight end has been getting involved. Joe Mixon can bust out for a big game. So I think it's a situation where the Bengals are certainly a team to watch, not only in the AFC North in terms of the Ravens, Steelers, and other teams, but in terms of overall the AFC, Chiefs, Bills, it's going to be a tight run down the stretch.
And sticking with the NFC East, Washington Commanders. They had a win 24-16 over the Falcons. I think it may have been more about the Falcons making mistakes, in particular Desmond Ritter. But do we think that the Commanders can get into the race in terms of the NFC East and, challenge maybe, I'll say, the Cowboys for second position behind the Eagles?
They're stout on defense, so they're going to be strong on defense. They're going to be formidable. I think in terms of can Sam Howell be, we throw that elite quarterback word around, but if you don't have one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the division, then you don't really have a chance. So can Sam Howell step up and become better than Daniel Jones? Obviously, he's probably better than Daniel Jones, but can he be a better quarterback than Dak Prescott down the stretch? Can Brian Robinson be a lead running back? So I think for those guys, it'd be about the offense, Eric Bieniemy, and what he can get out of them. In terms of the defense, they're stout up front. They have 4 great, defensive linemen. Chase Young is starting to get healthy, so they'll definitely be a team to watch. But it'll be about what they can do on offense, and can Sam Howell be an elite quarterback or at least one of the top 8 or 10 quarterbacks in the NFC?
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Washington, they were one of 8 teams that started season 2-0. And we know from last year, every team that started 2-0, they made the playoffs. And we'll
Right.
see if they're able to carry it forward. So it was San Francisco, Miami, Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, Dallas, Atlanta, Washington, Baltimore, New Orleans. Now, out of that group, who do you think may not make it to the playoffs that started 2-0?
Atlanta.
Yeah, I think Atlanta and New Orleans would probably be my pick at this point. New Orleans is too up and down. And when I watched that game yesterday, um, Carr does not look right. I could see Olave and Thomas. They were getting a little frustrated, and he was not getting the ball out. And they lose. Houston beats them, another upstart team, 3-3. They beat the New Orleans Saints 20-13, and C.J. Stroud. Everybody is talking about this young man. When the draft came along, everybody said Bryce Young, but Stroud throws a better football, and he just looks more poised in the pocket to me.
Yeah, D'Amico Ryans and those guys did a good job. I mean, I watched him twice in the preseason, and he didn't throw the ball really much, but you were unsure. And then you see him; he's coming out here. He's throwing the ball with accuracy. He's building chemistry with Tank Dell and those guys. You look up, they're 3-3. Will Anderson's been stout on defense. They're really good at the cornerback position. I'm kind of jealous. The cornerback, Jesus, the name is not coming to me, but the quarterback that was with Philadelphia left the Eagles and went to the Texans, and he's playing really well. So I mean, they're tough. It shows you how good of a coach D'Amico Ryans is, and he has a quarterback. So now all he has to do is build around that team. I'm shocked that Damian Pierce hasn't really taken off in terms of being one of the elite running backs in the NFL. But I think that might be more about the offensive line and the injuries to that group.
Yeah, and the thing with Houston is, they're an upstart, so it'll be interesting. They're on their bye next week, and then they're at Carolina in the battle of the two first-round quarterbacks, and we'll see how that one goes. And then they have Tampa Bay at Cincinnati, Arizona. So they'll be an interesting team. I always thought they'd be spoiler, and they're definitely going to surprise a lot of teams. You cannot look past them because we were talking about earlier. There's a lot of parity around the National Football League.
And I was talking about Steven Nelson. I owe him an apology, but
Steven Nelson, yeah. And it's all key around D'Amico Ryans, who's done a great job. I remember talking to him when he was the Eagles linebacker, and he's a guy that knows the game. He built that defense for the Niners, and now you see Steve Wilkes has kind of just picked it up and moved forward with it. And he's a good cerebral quarterback. And you could see these young players are rallying around them. So, Texans are going to be a fun watch coming down the stretch. You're listening to Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. We're talking to Glenn Erby from USA Today. Glenn, we're going to change gears and kind of start looking forward to Week 7. I don't have the lines out here. I know it's very early, but we'll just kind of throw the game out there, and then we'll just kind of say, okay, you can give your thoughts, and I will too. First off, there's a lot of teams on a bye. So for all you fantasy football players, you need to know who's on a bye. Carolina, Cincinnati, Dallas, Houston, the New York Jets, and Tennessee are all on byes in Week 7. So, scramble to get your lineups together. Go to your waiver wire picks. Thursday night's going to be interesting because you have the Jacksonville Jaguars, and we saw they've won. They've righted the ship. They won 3 straight games, 2 of them over in London. They're going to the New Orleans Saints, who we just talked about, and the Saints are kind of an up and down team. When I look at this one, though, the Saints are tough in the dome. They play a lot different at home. Cameron Jordan and the rest of those guys, they seem to get after the quarterback down there. Their defense is pretty stout. Their offensive line, though, has some work to do. I saw Kamara being a little bottled up in that game yesterday. So if I had to lean on this one, I'd say right now that Trevor Lawrence, as long as he can get that football out of his hand and continue to make plays to Ridley and then Christian Kirk, and ATN's running the ball pretty well, I think that Jacksonville should win this one.
Yeah, I agree. Doug Peterson always has his guys starting to perform as they get better down the stretch. So as they start to get healthier, we're not sure if Lawrence will play, but if he plays in terms of the ability to pass the ball, what they've been doing on defense, I like the Jags as well.
Yeah, and then we move to Sunday. The Detroit Lions, who we were saying Dan Campbell's done a great job building this team up. They seem to be upstarts in the league, but they're coming out of their dome and they're coming to the East Coast, and there's probably going to be bad weather. We've seen this over and over again it seems in Baltimore where it's raining or it's foggy or something. But you got the Lions coming to the Ravens, and this is a this is a good marquee matchup. It could be a crazy Super Bowl type matchup, but Detroit's 5-1, and then you have the Ravens at 4-2. When I look at this one, this is a tough one to call, but I'll go with the Lamar Jackson at home. I know he's been playing pretty well, and Detroit's kind of beat up. They did get Amon-Ra St. Brown back, but they're kind of beat up in their secondary and defense, and I think the Ravens will be able to take advantage of that.
I agree. I think so as well. Regardless of the weather, I think that Ravens pass rush will be too much. Lions, they are 5-1, but they're just now getting used to expectations and lofty goals and different things like that. And I think this would be one of those first big games for them. It'd be a good experience for them, but they lose.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see Penei Sewell, their all-world left tackle, going against Clowney and the rest of that defense, Queen. So that's going to be a good one to match. I'm looking forward to that. The Raiders, who are 3-3, another team kind of under the radar, and Jimmy G got beat up, and he was in and out of this game, so we'll see if he's going to play in this one. But they still have Devontae Adams and the rest of the crew there. They're going to the Bears. Now, the Bears as well, their quarterback, Justin Fields is playing well the last couple of weeks, but he has a hand injury, and you wonder if he's even going to play in this one. I know they had a rookie coming in there, and he did okay for the Bears in stints, but he did have some bad interceptions that game. When I look at this one, I think Fields is probably not going to play in this one. So I'll go with the Raiders in this one, but it could get ugly if it's two backups.
I don't know. I like Tyson Bagent. I hear he's a pretty good guy. The Bears are playing at home. I'll take Chicago in the mini upset.
Nice. All right. Cleveland is 3-2, and they're going to Indianapolis, who's 2-4. They're talking about Anthony Richardson. We'll segue to this. We're talking about Anthony Richardson having shoulder surgery. He possibly might do it or not. His shoulder's pretty messed up. Do you think they ran Anthony Richardson too much on his design runs? And at this point, he's kind of beat up in his first season in the National Football League.
I'm not sure. I mean, Steichen did the same thing with Jalen Hurts. As an athletic quarterback, you're going to have design runs. I think it'll be one of those things that even if he has to miss the rest of the season and come back, it's going to be a situation where Shane Steichen, they drafted him to be an athlete, to be an athletic quarterback, to be a dual threat. Those design runs are going to be there. So it'll be a situation about, helping him improve his sliding, helping him improve, not taking big hits, but in terms of them being efficient with RPOs, getting the most out of Jonathan Taylor, getting the most out of that offense, Anthony Richardson's going to have to run the football.
Yeah, and you named a key person here. If Jonathan Taylor finally starts getting his carries, I know Zach Moss has kind of broken out the last couple weeks since Taylor signed that big contract, but they didn't sign him to sit on the bench. So I think you may see Taylor come out in this one and have a pretty good game. But we did talk about that Browns defense. That Browns defense is one of the best out there underneath Jim Schwartz, Myles Garrett, the rest of those guys. So I expect this one to be a close one. I actually surprisingly will go with the Cleveland Browns in this one.
I agree. I mean, I think, like you said, those guys are going to get after Gardner Minshew. He's semi-athletic, but he's not athletic, and he'll definitely put the ball up for grabs. So I think it's a situation where the Browns stepped on the defensive line. That pass rush should just be too much.
I'll jump around. The Steelers are 3-2 and they're coming off their bye.
Okay.
They travel out to the LA Rams, they're a surprisingly sneaky good team, and they're playing at home where they feel comfortable in a perfect dome situation. And then you have Cooper Kupp, and the Steelers have hung on. They're 3-2, but sometimes you shake your head, you're like, how are they 3-2? But TJ Watt has got to be blocked, and this LA Rams offensive line, we saw against the Eagles, they just have trouble when it comes to pressure. I think the Steelers will try to, Joey Porter Jr. and the rest of their secondary will try to shut down Kupp, but that they're going to have to let him eat and then say, all right, no one else is going to beat him. But I'll go with the Steelers again in an ugly win. I think they get the pressure on Stafford and he makes a mistake.
I agree. I think George Pickens is capable of having a big game. That those Rams corners struggled with AJ Brown, a couple of weeks ago. So there are yards to be had there. So I like the Steelers. Deontay Johnson's coming back. They're getting healthy at the right time. If they can just get Najee Davenport going, everything will be. I mean, Najee Harris going, everything will be good. But I like the Pittsburgh Steelers to win on the road.
And you have the Chargers going to the Kansas City Chiefs in a rivalry divisional matchup in the AFC West. This is going to be an interesting one because the Chargers getting ready to play in a few minutes, and we'll see how they do there. But Patrick Mahomes, to me, has not looked that good. He's put the ball in harm's way against the Jets. He had some very bad interceptions in that game, and it's a situation where, yeah, he's winning games and stacking W's, but he's got to do a better job protecting the football. It's going to be interesting to see if that Chargers defense, if they're able to get after him and make him make mistakes. But I think in the end, you'll see KC win this one.
I agree. I mean, I think you'd like to see a duel. You'd like to see Justin Herbert do his thing, but I think Mahomes would be fine. I think he has those weapons. He has the ability to make any throw. So I think that's one of those things that gets him in trouble. And he'll try to make the throw, but he still has Andy Reid to reel him in. So I like the Chiefs as they start to settle in for the stretch run.
You got Green Bay Packers coming off their bye,
Okay.
and they're at the Denver Broncos. So this is a loser leaves town match from
Right.
talking pro wrestling days, and it's Jordan Love looked terrible his last game, and he's got to play better than that. I think Aaron Jones is going to be able to come back from his hamstring injury in this one after the bye week, so that'll be a good addition for the Packers. As we talked about earlier, I just think the Broncos are a total mess, and it's going to have to be a rebuild. So, what do you think? I think the Packers in this one.
I agree. I mean, Denver's selling off defensive assets, so who knows who'll be on the roster at that point. Aaron Jones is starting to get healthy. He's the key for Green Bay. Aaron Jones go. Jordan Love can be more comfortable in the pocket. He has weapons on the outside. I think the Packers in a big win.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And coming down the stretch here, the Sunday Night Football one. I know we previewed this one a lot. It's going to be Miami Dolphins coming to Philadelphia, and I can already hear my Eagles relatives get ready to groan. I think in this one, I think Miami's going to win this football game. I think the Eagles secondary is a little too beat up, and they're kind of vulnerable, and you're going to see some big plays out of this Miami Dolphins team, and it's going to be interesting to see if the Eagles can get that pressure on Tua to have him not feel comfortable in pocket. But I think Miami's going to win this one. It may be a track meet game, but I'm going to go Miami.
I'm going to go the opposite. I think pressure bust pipes. You have Jalen Carter coming back. He's a bit, pissed off. He's on the defense. He's on the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year quest. You'll have Josh Sweat. You'll have Hassan Reddick. I think those guys will come off the edge and waves. I think they'll make Tua and that offensive line uncomfortable. I think you'll see Sean Desai back those guys up. He'll get Slay back to play a little bit of zone, make the Dolphins work for it. And I think the Eagles regroup and get the win at home with the Kelly Green uniforms.
Yes, yeah. Everybody's talking about the Kelly Greens, and then the question will be, why can't they wear them every game? That was the uniforms they wore when I was a kid.
Yeah, same.
And then Reggie White and all the guys, and the midnight, it's almost black. You know what I mean? It's a totally different look.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of Eagles fans are excited about that. I think they sold more of those jerseys than anything else on NFL Shop. So. Definitely, if you're Eagles fan, go grab one of them. The Monday night football game, Glenn, is San Francisco 5-1. They're at Minnesota, who's trying to rebound. I don't think Kirk Cousins is going to play in this one. Their quarterback, so that kind of makes this a little interesting. I think that it's going to be the Niners in this one.
I agree. I like the Niners in a big way. I think the Vikings are one of 2 or 3 teams who are trying to get themselves into the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. So I think, at this point, the Vikings aren't total sellers, but they're not looking to win either. So I like San Francisco big.
Yeah. It's Justin Jefferson that's out. It's not Kirk Cousins. I messed that one up. But yeah, not having Justin Jefferson, that's definitely something that Minnesota is going to be tough for them to overcome.
I don't think they really care at this point. I think, like we said, you have a few teams trying to get in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. You have Kirk Cousins on his way elsewhere. So it could all work out.
Yeah. Well, 2-4, if that quickly turns to another number, if it earns a 2-6, yeah, I definitely agree with you that the Minnesota Vikings may be looking other places, and this is a big, huge battle. You got an angry San Francisco team coming in there, and then they're at Green Bay in a rivalry game, at Atlanta. They have New Orleans, and then they're at Denver. So they have some winnable games in there, and they could get back in the mix, but I think they're a long way from trying to get one of the
I agree.
7 coveted playoff spots. And you're listening to Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game and Broad Street South Network. We are talking with Glenn Erby from USA Today. He's a writer. He works on the Eagles Wire and the Ravens Wire. So if you're fans of either of those teams, definitely check out those sections of the USA Today site to check out some of Glenn's great writing there. So we've been recapping the game. I've had a great time talking with him. I know that Glenn and I have been Twitter buddies for a while. We're always, during the games, we'll tweet at each other. I'll read what he tweets, and he'll read what I, maybe like
Same.
what I sent out there. And it was good to get him going. We'll definitely get him on as the season goes along. And another great night here at Insider Football. And before I let you out, Glenn, who's going to win the game tonight, Dallas or the Chargers? Quick pick.
I'm on my Stephen A. I like the Chargers. I'll have something to laugh about tomorrow. So I like Herbert and those guys. I think Khalil Mack and all those guys that get after Dak Prescott. I like the Chargers at home. Not trolling either. I like them at home.
Yeah, and I agree with you. That the Dak Prescott on the road is just not the same guy as in the Jerry Dome, and he just does not play on. I think Dallas is kind of stalling out. They're kind of a paper champion, as I'd like to say. They beat up one of the teams. The easy teams they beat up on. Yep. So, all right. Well, we had a great time here with Glenn Erby on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. Thanks for hanging in there. We will talk to you next week.
Appreciate you, Lloyd. Appreciate you, Angel. Thank you guys for having me on, man.
Oh, there we go. I guess Glenn didn't. Well, he probably didn't know we do like a little recap before we hang up.
Yeah, I don't think so either, because he sent me a message saying, "Hey, I got to run." So I'm like, "All right, I'll let Lloyd know."
I didn't realize it. Okay, good.
Yeah, no, but it's all right though, because he did well. He ended up hanging in there. That's why he said the thank you real quick to sign off. But no, it ended up being well.
Yeah, good. And I had a bunch of guys already say,